So as we had looked at before, these pseudo elements really give the selectors a little bit more functionality. So here we've added in another pseudo element into divs where we're selecting the first letter and we're just coloring it red. So we go out to the code, we see that in fact indeed all the first letters of any div are going to be colored red. So if you see here, there's a second div, this one, and maybe we're just going to remove out that coloring that we had there before and just refresh that so it does highlight a little bit more. So we can see that in fact the first letter is always going to be red in the divs, and again this comes out to making it specific and being able to really isolate those parts of the element that you want to work with and you want to customize the color and styling of. Styling called for all the first letters to have a color of red and maybe be bold. We can go back out and we can add that in and refresh the page, and we see that in fact the pseudo elements are applying those styles, that property to each individual div, starting letter of the divs. So with the pseudo styling, you also do have options to do stuff like this, where you can pick up the child and you can do the odd ones, you can do the even ones, and the code simply just looks like this. So we're identifying that selector and picking up that additional nested element, and from here we're doing nth child and we're doing odd. We can also do things like even, and just to show you how that turns out, and we can select out all of these different children that are available within that particular selector. So in addition to being able to add hover to hyperlinks, you can also add it to any element. So I've just added it to all the different spans that are available within this element, and you can see here once I hover over them we do have this changing background color. So there's quite a lot you can do with pseudo elements, and we're going to give you a link to see a little bit more code and a little bit more pseudo elements because there's quite a lot to go through. So we're going to be providing a document for that in the next lesson. So within this lesson, we're going to bring together all of the CSS styling as well as the HTML code that we've looked at within the previous lessons. So we're just going to show you what it's going to look like with the CSS styling and then without the CSS styling. So without CSS, our web page is rather plain and there's not a whole lot happening. So when we do add in that CSS link, that CSS page, and we go back out and we refresh our website template, we can see that now we've got some really nice effects and we've got basically a web template that's ready to go. Just quickly added these additional HTML pages, and as we can see as we go through them, we're actually able to see that once we do click on those links, they're going to turn orange because we've already visited them. So going back to the index page, we see that our page actually resizes, so it is responsive, and we see that some of the content will move down and shift under depending on the width of the website or the browser. And the way that we're doing that is we've added in what's called media queries, and with media queries, so we're able to set media screen. If the maximum width is 960, then it's going to apply these. So anything under 960, it's going to apply this. And anything under 600, it's going to apply all this styling, all these styling properties. And then just by default, if it's not matching any one of these criteria, it's just applying that regular styling. So this gets applied to every single web page and every single piece of content that we have. So that's our default template for creating web pages. And now we're going to dive deeper into the code. So the way that we've structured it is a standard HTML page where we've got our document type, our HTML, our head content, we're linking to our CSS, we've got our title here, and then some metadata in order to have that resizing, that viewport, and then determining what type of content it is that we're outputting. So we've also divided up our page. We've created one div and we just called it wrapper. So this is going to encompass that entire body area. So in case we want to do something and add additional divs, it's going to make it easy to do that without really affecting our website. So if we want to have some pop-up divs that are showing, we're going to keep them outside of our wrapper, but we still want them within our body. And that's the reasoning for adding that additional div, because we could very well just set that body properties if we want to be the same as the wrapper, and really it's going to be the same thing. But for us, we're trying to keep them separate because just forward thinking with what we might want to do with this website, keeping it separate is more along the lines of what we're looking to do. So going back into the HTML structure, we've got our header here. So this is just what's showing up here at the head. So I kind of want to have a website title and some supporting text that is just going to show up right below the title. So just a title and then just some supporting text, maybe a logo or a slogan or something like that. We can add in an image. Whatever we want, we can add in there at that point. And then of course the navigation, so we've kept that near the top within the header area, and that's because we want to keep that area separated out. So it actually, in fact, it is out of the header itself, because if we're keeping it within the header would get constrained. We've set a fixed height for the header, and if we had our navigation bar within there, we would be cramming that within that header spacing. So not ideal, and that's why we've actually moved it out of the header, and we just have our standard unordered list and list items, and then we've styled them using CSS to style that navigation. So we've designed our website with 3 sections. So we've got our first section, second section, and then our main section here. So maybe we should just call that section as well. So again, it doesn't there are very little differences, if any, between how you name the naming convention. So it's how you get used to naming it. Before, what we were doing is we'd set a div and we'd give it an ID of maybe content, give this an ID of header, give this an ID of footer. So with HTML5, we've actually set up these specific tags really to break out what this content is. So this is a 1 section, 2 sections, 3 sections. So if we had a sidebar, maybe we could rename it that aside, or whatever we want to name it to. If we had a blog, we could name that as well differently, articles, and so on. And so lastly, we've got our footer area, and then all of this is controlled with the CSS style sheet. And we're going to get more into that in the later lesson.